It was early morning over a shattered Germany. Airfields lay half frozen under a thin layer of winter fog. Fuel was scarce. Morale was lower. But the Luftwaffe still had one duty left: scramble and defend against Allied bombing runs that came like clockwork. On paper, the German pilots were still dangerous. In reality, they were exhausted. Inside a concrete bunker near a forward airfield, pilots sat in silence, listening to distant engine reports over crackling radios. Some cleaned their goggles, others stared at flight maps they already knew by heart. They expected the usual pattern. American bombers would appear in formation. German fighters would scramble. A dogfight would follow. That was the routine. That morning, they had no idea the routine had already changed. At 0612 hours, the radar operator frowned. Something was wrong. He adjusted the scope again. Then again. Shapes appeared, too high, too fast, too organized. Possible Allied bombers inbound, he reported. But then came another reading. Smaller blips. Escort fighters. Too many. And too far ahead of the bombers. One officer leaned over the screen. That's impossible. They can't already be here. But they were. Flying high above the clouds. Silent, invisible in the early light. American P-51 Mustangs had already taken position. Not approaching. Waiting. The alarm siren finally screamed across the airfield. Luftwaffe ground crews ran across icy tarmac. Mechanics pulled covers off aircraft. Fuel hoses were rushed into place. Pilots sprinted toward their planes. Engines roared to life one by one. Messerschmitt Bf-109s lined up for takeoff. Their propellers spinning violently in the cold air. One young pilot climbed into his cockpit, adjusting his headset. "Enemy bombers confirmed?" he asked. No one answered clearly. Because the radar operator was no longer confident. Something felt wrong. Too quiet above them. Too controlled. As the first German fighters lifted off the runway, the sky changed. Cloud cover broke slightly. Sunlight hit metal wings above them. And that's when the first pilot saw it. Shapes. Not approaching. Not distant. Right above. American P-51 Mustangs, sleek, fast, already positioned in altitude. Advantage. Circling silently, like predators waiting for movement. One German pilot shouted into his radio, "They're above us!" But it was too late. The trap had already closed. The first burst of gunfire wasn't from the Germans. It came from above. A P-51 dived out of the sun, its engine screaming as 50 caliber rounds tore through a climbing Messerschmitt. The German aircraft never saw it coming. Another P-51 followed instantly. Then another. The sky stopped being empty. It became controlled chaos. German pilots who had just taken off were now climbing directly into American kill zones. There was no safe altitude, no safe direction. Only survival, if possible. Inside one German cockpit, a pilot looked up through his canopy. He didn't see confusion. He saw design. The Americans weren't reacting. They were waiting, holding altitude, controlling the entire airspace before the Germans even left the ground. A voice crackled over the radio. "We never got a chance to form up." Another voice broke in. They were already here. Before we even started. Above the battlefield, the P-51 Mustang proved why it had changed the war. Long range, high speed, perfect escort coordination. They weren't just defending bombers anymore. They were hunting, flying in disciplined formations. American pilots rotated positions, maintaining altitude advantage and striking only when targets entered their zone of control. No wasted movement. No panic. Just precision. Below them, German fighters struggled to climb, turn, or escape. They were already outmatched before the fight began. The Luftwaffe pilots realized something terrifying. They were not fighting a dogfight. They were fighting in a ranged execution zone. Every attempt to regroup was intercepted. Every climb was punished. Every escape route was covered. The sky itself had been mapped and controlled before they arrived. One German pilot broke radio silence. "This isn't combat. It's waiting for death in the air." Back at the airfield, radar operators stared in disbelief. The enemy formation wasn't moving randomly. It was coordinated, predictive, like they already knew German launch time.